Welcome back to Close Up. The issue of New Hampshire's lack of racial diversity has long been one of the more pointed criticisms of the state's first-in-the-nation primary status. But it's taken on a new dimension in this cycle with a very diverse Democratic field of candidates and a more robust examination of why states like Iowa and New Hampshire should retain their positions of privilege. Here to discuss this topic this morning is Carlos Cardona, chair of the Laconia Democrats, Jerry Ann Bogus, who is the executive director of the Black Heritage Trail of New Hampshire, and the Honorable Latha Manjapudi, representative in the House of Representatives from Nashua. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
So I want to start with you, Carlos. You played a unique role in this primary. While the national narrative is that New Hampshire does not have diverse voices in positions of power, you have almost single-handedly been able to turn Laconia into this ground zero for the candidates to come and campaign for votes. What's your perspective on the national narrative that New Hampshire no longer deserves its first-in-the-nation status because of a lack of diversity?
I absolutely don't agree with the narrative at all, and I've actually find myself on the national stage debating this very often, especially on social media. New Hampshire gives an opportunity to all candidates, and you see that with the diversity of the candidates that we have. I've seen giant crowds in New Hampshire for all candidates. Nobody has been excluded from the process. I remember my first candidate that I hosted in Happily, Julian Castro, Cory Booker, Harris, who came to Belknap County. So I really don't buy this narrative. I really do think that it's corporations really trying to take it away from New Hampshire. New Hampshire is a cheaper state to run in, where everybody has a fair chance to run. I'm a perfect example, you know, running here in New Hampshire. My city has given me many opportunities to be able to express myself and lead. And I really don't think New Hampshire deserves to have that taken away from the state. Granite Staters take it very seriously, the process. So,
Jerry Ann, when Representative Tim Ryan, a presidential candidate back this summer, visited the Black Heritage Trail of New Hampshire, you made a very interesting point saying that when people criticize New Hampshire as being too white, they're doing something inadvertently to voices of color here. What are they doing there?
So basically, when we call our state one of the whitest state in the union, erase keep this narrative of whiteness, we erase a 400-year history of African Americans, people of color here in our state, which is a rich and vibrant history. And we see, if we go back to the formation of the state, we see people of color, black people, doing exactly the same things as our white founding fathers doing, being good citizens in our community, creating libraries, you know, giving schools, teaching, and doing everything to create in pursuit of happiness and to be good citizens. So in doing that, we erase it. And this is one of the things that is unique about New Hampshire, is this really, it's a place for independent thought. And that's, I think, one of the things that helps us to retain that first-in-the-nation status, because we don't lean one way or another. We have a way of thinking independently, of bringing our thoughts. People get to meet the candidates up close and personal because of the size of our state. So you get an in-depth look at candidates. So yeah, I think it's really important for us to keep our field diverse, but I think the voices in New Hampshire, especially now that we have growing populations, changing populations in our state, to be able to look at issues in a very open and honest and independent way.
Yeah, certainly that culture, very important. Representative Manjapudi, from an elected perspective, do you believe that New Hampshire gives candidates of color a fair shake?
You know, yes and no. It is one of the great opportunity here, like the others have pointed out. I've lived here for 30 years, and I'm serving my 4th term. But to watch the debate last week and not have people representing, and New Hampshire does have the diversity, but it's a very quiet, because I can talk about the Nashua area, where we have 25% of diverse population of Nashua, and out of which Indian Americans are 6%. That's not a small percentage, and also contributing in terms of economic, education, and healthcare. There's a lot of contribution there. And don't look at it like there's no representation. There is a beautiful diversity in New Hampshire, but it's not celebrated or held nationally. You know, the first thing they tell me when I say I'm an elected official, I'm a state legislator from New Hampshire, how come you got elected in an all-white state? you know, and I'm like, it never occurred to me that I'm in a pure white, you know. I can see the diversity changing, and look at our state house, right? And, you know, that's where I'm having a hard time coming to terms with. We have a great Democratic slate, and why isn't Cory Booker and Castro coming up in the polls? I'm not answering the polls. Are they really reaching out to folks that are diverse in the community? You know, people have shut off. But Granite Staters take this first in the nation very seriously. 53% are still undecided.
It's interesting you point that out. I wonder if the polling formula might need to change to evolve with some of New Hampshire's growing diversity.
So I just want to make one more point in terms of on December 6th, you know, I was supposed to host. That's the other advantage we have, is hosting presidential candidate. So I was supposed to host a house party for Cory Booker, Senator Booker. Within 24 hours, I had over 100 people RSVP wanting to show up. And many, more than 50% were people who look like me.
Well, the people always do want to see the candidates, that's for sure. So, Carlos, if you were in a New York or a California or an Illinois, do you think what you've done in this cycle would be possible?
I would have zero voice in a state like California, Texas, Florida, New York. And the reason why, somebody who was a homeless youth in the state of New Hampshire, LGBT, Latino, would have zero chance of being able to have a platform to speak up. What I've been able to do in New Hampshire is very unique to our tradition and a very powerful thing that gives local the control and the power to have a conversation. I've seen every issue discussed in the state of New Hampshire. Something that if we went to New York, probably we would not be talking about anything closely, remotely related to what's happening nationally. I think when you go to big states where money reigns in politics, it takes away from not only minorities, but it takes from everybody as a whole. The reason Donald Trump won in 2016 is because rural America had their voice taken away. And Donald Trump went to rural America and pretended to give them a voice. And I say pretended because I don't agree that he actually is fighting for them. But that means a lot to people in rural America, to people like in my city of Laconia, New Hampshire, in places like Franklin, New Hampshire, in places where they're struggling to get out of the hole. So these cities are doing much better now. But I do truly think that when Democrats start to give voices to rural places, we all do very well as a nation. So I think that that's something that has changed this year, and it's something that Iowa and New Hampshire has done very good at maintaining that conversation. When you give big states the microphone, you take so much away from little states that can actually make a huge difference. And I actually do think, I always like to make this point, New Hampshire is a great place to start talking about policies and ideas because it's a lot smaller of a state. You're able to run the idea by a lot more people, and you're able to really kind of test the grounds.
Jerry Ann, obviously there's no part of this country that is untouched by racism, but New Hampshire's political culture, as we were talking about, is a big part of the primary. What can be done to make it more inclusive, though?
To make our primary more inclusive?
I guess the process. If what we can do to draw in more voices of people of color.
I think the way we are as a state, because we're a small enough state that we can actually come to the table. There are places that we, as people of color, have to step up to as well. You know, New Hampshire still has an old tradition, right, where the old families keep, you know, say in the school boards or, you know, in the towns. And that's usually the first place where we see people of color working to get in their own town, because every politics is local, right? So that's what we as people of color have to step up. And I think the independent nature of New Hampshire and being able to voice things just as they are, to speak up, to talk about what's going on, regardless of race, regardless of these, you know, the differences, but what affects us all is what brings us in. But we have to feel that we have a seat at the table. And I think it's up to others to realize that we are, as a state, we are changing. You know, we've got a very small workforce. We can't fill our jobs. And that's because of the false look that we're not a diverse state. So, you know, there's onto us as people of color to step up. and it's on, opening up the doors to realize that we have to do things in order to be a viable economic state of the future.
And it's interesting, it often gets overlooked, but the Republicans, 3 cycles in a row, have nominated a person of color in the 2nd Congressional District, 3 different people, and of course Eddie Edwards in the 1st Congressional District in the last cycle. So I'll put you on the spot a little bit, Representative Mangiapudi. The Democrats need to do a better job of elevating their own voices of people of color to give them those same kind of shots.
When you look at the State House, we have the Democrats. When I look on the Democratic side of the aisles, I see a lot more diversity. We elected a young refugee, and LGBTQ person, and women, and this is my 4th term. And there are times when I say, oh, should I really look up? And this has been the worst in terms of my colleagues on the, on the other side of the aisle, looking at me as a person of color, not so much as a qualified person to bring issues. And you know how hard I tried to bring the bridges from India resources in terms of what we need for healthcare or renewable energy and all that. To have this colored glass to say, it's coming from you. And that rhetoric is so much more stronger in my 4th term than when it was. And this I attribute a lot to the election of 2016. And, I feel like even though I'm just a state rep, one of 400, I feel like there's a stronger voice. I mean, I'm getting calls from across the country and even from India. So to representing people of color. So, I think New Hampshire is doing, we just have to be open.
Right, and the conversation will continue. I feel like we need to bring you back for more of this. I want this conversation to continue. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Carlos, Jerry-Ann, and Representative Mangiapudi, thank you so much for joining us. And I promise we'll continue this conversation later.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having us.